The Venus Project, Teamspeak Seminar, June 19, 2011.
We really appreciate this opportunity to do this and appreciate everybody coming here to learn more about it. Okay, so let's just start right in. How do we address problems of people taking parts of Jacques' total system redesign and breaking it up into pieces that suit where they are at? This part of Jacques' design is a resource-based economy, I'd say, and even redefining it to suit their own values and needs. Do you want to address that? Or?
It has to be in accordance with the Venus Project. It cannot be their own projections.
Well, essentially, we can't do much about that. We don't have control over that. And if people want to deal with what the Venus Project really is, its real intent, and then they have to work with us. Semantics is a huge issue in the world. The Venus Project, i.e., the actual project itself, is the redesign of our global culture, and part of that redesign is to implement a resource-based economy. Do you feel some of the wording on your website needs to be revised to make this clearer to people who think that they can redefine a resource-based economy their own way and make it out to be something separate from the rest of the design? Yeah, this is a problem because people in other organizations are just taking the aspect of a resource-based economy that Jacques has defined that is part of, as you stated well, a total global cultural approach, the redesign of our global culture. And we probably will look at how this is worded on the Venus Project website and add some things or change some things. Andrew and I have been talking about this a great deal because I know we hear these things like, well, these other organizations are working for the same thing. They really are not. They're not that inclusive to understand what this is about. And otherwise we'd be working with them together, and we're not. Can Jack give some examples using physical reference to stop yourself from getting too emotional when answering questions that under normal conditions you don't get emotional about, you would get emotional about?
What you have to do is refer to some physical event, like how much arable land is there, how much building material is there. You don't have to refer to anything but what we specify. So all decisions will be arrived at rather than made, meaning knowing what the conditions are, what's available, transportation units to bring building materials to a given place would have to be all collected, all that data. Your decisions are based on the data you collect, not your own feelings.
You talk of a world without police and military. Do you think we can jump straight into that on the first city?
No, the transition will require the remainder of those forces. The utilization of police and military only during the transition, however long that takes.
Is that something that you advocate, the military,
Yeah.
with the transition?
Only during the transition. The military is under the guidance of the Venus Project. Otherwise, no.
How will it be decided? Who will populate the first city? Will people be tested?
Only the planners, the architects, the designers of transportation systems. That's the first and maybe even the second city. The third city will be based on our production methods and the materials available.
Also, I want to add, in the first city, we will need a lot of other people, not just the planners, but people who are doing books, videos, media, to try and help spread the word about this system. People who can give seminars, teach others. There'd be a lot of people who are functional in this direction to help promote it and can do something within it.
Too. People that are capable of doing that.
Regarding the making of the movie, are you planning on hiring a full production team? We would go with a studio or a full production team. There are several options we're still looking at right now and talking to people about. So the way this will go exactly, we're not sure. We have several possibilities, but we could work with another full studio if that was the case. Is the current script available to look at? It's not something that we are handing out to the public, the script, even when it's finished. I don't know of any movie that does that before it's presented. I think that might work against us in many ways. I am disabled, use a wheelchair, and have personal assistance 24/7. Who would want to work to help me in a resource-based economy, and how would I contribute?
You contribute in whatever way you can. And there'll be lots of people that would want to help you.
I think more time for people to want to help others like that. Okay, will there be a campaign to republish your books and DVDs across the world? How can global teams help with this? There are many people who are translating our books and DVDs all through the linguistic team. And if you go on to get involved on our website and global activism, you can find a link to the linguistic team. There are people who are translating the book, The Best That Money Can't Buy, as well, and working out how to publish it with us. They're discussing with us how to publish that in various ways. So if anybody wants to do that, please get in touch with us. That would be great. Should global teams try and contact someone from the movie industry? Are there any guidelines if we are to do that? Yes, please go to Global Activism. Get in touch with Craig with the media team, and you can learn all about how you can help in that way. In my country, in order to reach politicians and present them with the Venus Project, we have to register as a non-governmental organization. Do you have any suggestions on that, and what name should we pick? Does it matter if we register as Zeitgeist Movement, as translated into their language? There are several people around the world, several groups who are in the same situation. And in Greece, they did a nonprofit affiliated with us. In Portugal, they're doing it in Brazil and in France. So we recommend this. If you want to affiliate with us, just write me an email and I'll go over with you what's needed to do that. If you register under the Zeitgeist Movement, then we couldn't work like that. It's like saying you want to register under the name Greenpeace, but push for the Venus Project. It makes no sense to us. So the other people who are doing this are taking on a separate name, but not affiliated with any other organization, and this is what we'd have to do. But we can go over that more so if you get in touch with me directly. Will there be a test for those in global teams who want to present the Venus Project to politicians and the general public? We are all eager to spread the ideas. We have a lecture team on our site as well, and if you join that, there's really no test, but they are making up questions and answers only for their self-assessment and to know what people need to go over. In the linguistics team and within all the teams that we have, we're making educational materials so you can learn more about this direction. And that's really priority to us, to learn about this direction first. The thing we're doing right now is having people read the book amongst the different teams, amongst the lecture team as well, and then discuss it together as a group. Read a few pages or read a chapter or so and discuss what you got out of it. Do you have any other ideas on that? We were going over that.
No, that's it.
Yeah. So everybody's on the same page, understanding it, and you can ask questions as well in regards to what you're reading will be accessible for you. As I mentioned, we are making more educational materials for this right now, but there's no test per se. How do people distinguish good and bad inner feelings?
We don't deal with that. We don't deal with that at all. And there's in your feelings, you're presenting the Venus Project, and you're presenting it as best you can.
You said people's troubles come from their expectations. How can someone plan something and have no expectations about it?
Well, I wouldn't say they have no expectations. The harder you work, the closer the reality. The effort you put out will determine the probability of it occurring. How many people you can convince, how many nations you can convince to join with us. It has nothing to do with anything but the carrying out of the Venus Project. Only presenting designs and the way the system operates, the way it utilizes energy, you don't have to deal with expectations. You just put out the best information you have. What occurs is the reality of the situation. I can't predict what people will do. I can only say if you do nothing, nothing will happen.
Sometimes the different reactions you get, too, will enable you to alter your presentation.
That's true.
Okay, if a child asks to explain an abstract word which has no physical referent, like what is freedom, what is religion, can you recommend a way to deal with it?
Yeah, just describe what we teach in schools, read our books so you get the information. When a child asks an abstract question, you have to show the child what a referent is. When you talk about the forest, you talk about trees. When you talk about the oceans, you're talking about the bodies of water between the continents, etc. So you always have a referent. You have high altitude discussions, you have undersea discussions, but your reference is the subject you're talking about.
What about when the child asks something like freedom and religion?
Well, people are free to choose whatever religion they've been indoctrinated with, and they can practice it and carry it out. Those that don't want to practice that don't have to. Just that it doesn't have a referent, period. It doesn't have anything you can point to and say that's what freedom is. There's no such thing as freedom. The freedom means if you don't like somebody, can you kill them? And if you want to go in your own direction, can you do that? No, there's no freedom in any scientific system. They're called the disciplines because they have already worked out most of the directions it operates in. In other words, a scientific discipline in chemistry works a certain way, engineering, mathematics a certain way. I don't know how the word freedom or anything else would fit in that. We use that discipline in accordance with the teachings of the discipline.
So you teach the child maybe it's an abstraction and there's nothing, it can mean many things to many people.
We can't afford that.
Words
it's too
such
loose.
as that.
Not having a specific meaning. If you say build a city for many people, I don't know what that means. But build a city for 10,000 people, I know what that means. It tells me how much water we need, how much arable land we need to feed the people. That's what a referent means. It means what do you have to carry out a program. You have to base your program on what you have, not what you'd like to see.
So teaching children those differences, they'd be able to cope with the real world more so.
Yes.
In the book, The Engineers of the Price System by Thorsten Veblen, he speaks about the need for social movement to include the industrial system. Otherwise, it wouldn't accomplish anything. Would the building of the first city be part of installing a new industrial system, or would there need to be agreements by the current industrial system to uphold the conditions of production until the resource-based economy is developed?
Yes, during the transition, this will be true. We will use existing production systems. But after the transition, we will use new production systems.
Hypothetically, if the monetary system collapsed tomorrow and society embraced the Venus Project, do we have the technology right now to implement various transportation, construction, and other systems to build a city in line with what is proposed by the Venus Project?
Yes, we do. We do have the implementation methods, and we do have enough transportation facilities to carry out the initial phases during the transition.
Okay, this person writes, I assume most likely not, at least not at the level required to make these systems fully functional. If this is the case, is there a rationale for beginning to work now with engineers and the like to begin to develop these systems before the monetary system collapses, and to therefore be in a better position for readiness when the time comes?
I can't answer that specifically because I don't know how many people have been merged to solve these problems. I can't say that. I can't answer that question.
Well, we are planning soon, I hope, to start. Andrew is initiating this, working with us. We are going to be working with the engineers, with the architects to develop very specific blueprints for one of Jacques' cities. We already have some now, but we're updating it. So I'm going to let Andrew answer this as well.
Just to address the first part of the question by Gary, hypothetically, if the monetary system collapsed tomorrow and society embraced the Venus Project, do we have the technology right now to implement the Venus Project as Jacques designed it, basically? There's nothing in Jacques' designs that is particularly Star Trek-y, 1,000 years out from where we are now. The only thing I would say in any of Jacques' designs that we are in the early stages of developing would be the 3D printing side of things, as far as printing buildings and stuff like that's concerned. As far as things like renewable energy, as far as things like general construction techniques for constructing the buildings that Jacques designs, the transportation systems, for example, maglev, all of these things exist now. It's just that we're not using them because there's no profit incentive to develop these technologies globally and implement them globally. It's cheaper just to use fossil fuels, for example, on the energy side of things. And the same with trains. In London, we're using clapped out old trains from 100 years ago because it's cheaper to just keep fixing the problems as they arise than it is to actually implement a whole new system of maglev trains throughout the southeast, for example. We won't have that issue once we move into a resource-based economy because the required resources for implementing these things will actually be made available to the world's people to be able to implement these things globally. And once they're actually implemented globally, the cost becomes completely irrelevant. It's just a case of what resources we have available to do that. And we've got more than enough resources available at the moment. I can't say what it will be like in 50 years' time with our current state of depletion, but we certainly have the resources right now to be able to transform the face of the Earth completely and have plenty of resources left over. So just on the second part about the working with the engineers, etc., we are actually developing up, I've started over the last few weeks to develop up the structure required for implementing teams such as the city design team, the industrial engineering design team, the design team that will be dealing with the software side of things, so things like the central database system and the databases that will connect into that for the various systems within the cities and how those cities connect to each other, etc. So all of these sort of things we're now just starting to lay out the structure for and intend on actually starting these projects as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention too that there is no final end goal for a city. The first city, Jacques always mentions also that this could have been done, this could have been built. We had the technology in 1927 when mass production started coming on hand. So we could back then implemented a city or a total global approach where we could have achieved tremendous abundance for everyone all over the world even then. And these cities are emergent cities. We'll always be changing, always updating, always building new cities that are better, always modifying what we have. So there's no fixed notion that we're trying to do for a city. If we're able to do a city within the monetary system before it collapses, what it looks like really depends on the amount of funding we get, and the people in that first city would be the planners planning the next city, planning production methods of automated systems that we can apply more so in the next city. So it would always be improving. People considering career changes, should they choose the highly specialized one or get as many degrees in different technical professions to be a help to the Venus Project?
Yes. The more you know, the greater the help. We're very much interested in people becoming well-informed in as many areas as possible.
Is the collapse of the world economy inevitable? Is there a way to bring economy to a soft, quote, soft landing and minimize the disruption?
I don't know how to accomplish that. Whatever occurs, we'll have to deal with. I cannot predict that.
I guess the only help is to have as many people know about this as possible.
Yes.
It would be more secure that way.
The transition will be smoother the more people that know about it. If we don't have enough followers, the transition will be difficult.
Yeah, that's why we feel a major film is important, because it does reach a lot of people and reaches more so the general public. Okay, have you contacted Bill Gates or other people with more money than they would ever spend about the Venus Project? We are constantly reaching out to people, but we haven't contacted specifically Bill Gates. But the media team, please, if people want to help in this area, as I mentioned before, check out the media team on our website under Global Activism and get in touch with Craig. Can you give a brief description of how you see education in the future?
Education will be about the earth, about the environment, about maintaining dynamic equilibrium in society and the oceans and transportation. It would be based upon how many people occupy the city, how much available resources are there to feed and clothe the people in that city. All those decisions would depend upon what is available at the time.
All systems educate their people to perpetuate that system. So today you get bankers and lawyers and engineers, and you don't have a huge push on things that are beneficial to people, but beneficial to making money. So the Venus Project would educate people in the sciences a lot, in methods of making a high standard of living for everyone, improving energy systems, improving manufacturing, improving housing, improving food, clean sources of energy, things like that.
Yes,
anything to add to
I
that?
agree with that.
Okay. Can Jacques recommend books he read on physics? Well, there is a good book now, or a series of books actually, that they use for colleges and high school called Conceptual Physics by Paul Hewitt. And in fact, this is a book that's used in most colleges and high schools, as I mentioned. And in fact, the person who wrote that book used to go to Jacques sessions. He started as a sign painter. He went to Jacques sessions in the 60s or 70s, and he ended up going back to universities and colleges to look for other teachers like Jacques, but he found none. So he emulated his methods of teaching. He ended up majoring in physics and working in universities teaching physics, and he wrote a book called Conceptual Physics. At last we know it was in its 13th printing, and that edition, he actually had a full page on Jacques in that school book. So this is the book that Jacques recommends on physics. Would we self-educate, and if so, how would we avoid all the sunny day in May in existing teaching materials?
All the schools in the early days of the Venus Project would eradicate most of the sunny day in May type conversation, which does not really deal with any specific subject. Everything that the Venus Project advocates would be applicable at that time. There's no place for abstractions. The only thing the Venus Project talks about in its literature is how to.
With the understanding that global resource tracking inventory will ultimately be fully cybernated, are there any skill sets or software proficiencies you know of that would be advantageous to acquire in the interim?
The more you know about computer programming, the more you know about computers, the more knowledge you can add to it based on the Venus Project will help.
Wouldn't it be a better idea to not alienate the majority of the world's populations where...
I know what you want to know.
Yeah.
No, we will not cut into religion.
Well, let me read the
people
question.
Can practice whatever religion they want to.
Right, let me read the question so people know. Wouldn't it be a better idea to not alienate the majority of the world's population when they believe in God in some form or another and use the language for religion, I don't guess he meant of religion, rather than bash religion as a nonsensical fairy tale.
No, it would be better to permit people, allow people to choose whatever they wish.
But do you think it's a good idea to bash religion as a nonsensical fairy tale or curb that language?
Not at all. All you do is teach the Venus Project. You don't deal with subject matter that we have little or no information on.
Where the machines are responsible for everything done, how would a person feel in control and not controlled?
The amount of water that's pumped into a city depends on the size of the population. And no one feels control unless the reservoir runs dry. Then they have to devise another system. In other words, most elevators are not controlled by people. They're controlled automatically. And there's very little insecurity about an elevator not working. They work most of the time. And most of the electrification that comes to your home is controlled by you. How many lights you turn on, how many refrigerators you have, how many washing machines you have. You don't need to worry about that. Technology is self-operating.
Yeah, I don't think too many people feel out of control when they have a dishwasher and they're not washing their own dishes. Or if in the future the dishes will come up from the middle of the table and when you're finished they go back down to the middle of the table and wash themselves. I don't think people will feel that they're out of control. They'll be working on many, many other things and have so many different options. They'll have a different set of values than you have today. They won't be asking those questions. They'll be working on things that are very relevant. They'll have time for that instead of menial things that machines will be taking over. You know that example you give about what will women do? That's a good one. You want to go over that?
There was a period in history where women used to go down to the river and fetch water and bring it up to their mountain dwelling. And if you told them that someday you will turn a handle and water will flow out in your home, and someday you will press a button and lights will go on, and you can control the intensity of the light. And the women at that time used to say, what will women do?
Yeah, the women used to kill animals and get the oil and for the little oil lamp and things like that. They had no idea what women would do if you take all that away from them.
Women will be involved in the same thing men are involved in. There'll be engineers, chemists, educators, and all the fields necessary to operate the human complex.
What would happen if a murder occurred, for example, with envy or even biological flaw, since there is no police or prisons?
That would probably occur during the transition. We would help people, always help people, and put them back on track to the best of our ability. We will have no prisons, no punishment, because they're victims of culture. We feel that the culture impressed values upon people. When we go to war against Japan or Germany, it's the propaganda that's put out there that makes us want to enlist and kill Germans or Japanese people. I would say that since that no longer exists, since those methods are less than adequate, there'll be other methods of bridging the difference and teaching people how to find meaning in their own life and how to act in a way that would be supportive to a global economy.
Okay, how about ideas, people getting angry due to envy?
I see no basis for that. If people have access to the necessities of life, they don't steal. And if they lose their position of advantage, they may lie. No one can lose their positions in the future. Everyone has access to books, tapes, musical instruments, just like the public library. And where you don't have access to equipment, you'll have problems. So the sooner we solve those problems, the sooner we will maintain equilibrium in society. Wherever there's scarcity, there's problems. We'll have to work as hard as we can to overcome the shortages that exist in the world today.
That would mean scarcity of relationships as well.
Oh yes, that's true.
People probably wouldn't depend on one person that much. They'd identify with many people. So if somebody gets killed or a person that you're with wants to spend more time with somebody else, you're not that dependent on that person for various reasons.
It's all right.
How do we determine the world's carrying capacity for humans for maximum population size?
If you know what the resources are of the world, the global resource survey, then you know how many people can be supported by the carrying capacity of the environment or the earth as a whole. You'd have to do that survey first and then determine how large a population you want to maintain. If you try to maintain a population far in excess of what the environment can support, you're going to have trouble. No matter how many laws you make, or no matter how many laws you pass, that does not deal with the problem. What deals with the problem is maintaining the capacity to supply the needs of so many billions of people.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on that as well. If you'd asked what the ideal population size would have been 100 years ago, it'd be very different to the population size that we could maintain now. And technology is the main reason for that. As we develop more and more technologies, for example, in things like agriculture, such as hydroponics, aeroponics, aquaponics, agricultural towers, moving into the oceans, for example, there's lots of technological solutions that we'll be coming up with over the next 10 to 100 years that will have a huge impact on changing what the carrying capacity of the Earth will actually be. Currently, we've been limited to the amount of agriculture land that we've got available to us and things like this. We're very quickly approaching a time where that won't actually be an issue. And that will go from many things, from desalination of water to actual land mass required, etc., because we'll be doing things like moving into the oceans with sea cities, etc.
You're right, Andrew. That's a very good presentation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then in the future, I think as the resource-based economy develops, I think less and less people would have the aim to have more children. The more people are educated, the less children statistically even today they have, because there's more options for them. There'll be so many options in the future. It's stress today that one of the things that women do is have a husband and have a family, and that may not be the main goal in the future. I assure you it wouldn't. How long will it take to build a city?
Depends on when we are given the go-ahead sign and what country supports it and how much support we have. I can't answer that.
What are your thoughts about eating meat in a resource-based economy?
Well, in a resource-based economy, with advances in nanotechnology, we'll be able to produce almost everything we need. And there'd be no shortage of anything. But to produce meat today, the amount of food required, the feeding of animals, will take care of many more people than the weight of one cow. So I would say that organically grown vegetables will probably dominate the future for the first few years until we arrive at nanotechnology.
And it's very hard to know what real science is, even in this culture, when there's money interest behind it. There has to be so much research in the future that needs to be done to determine just what's beneficial for different people to eat and for what reasons. You can't do that research today. Is it possible to own pets or horses in a Venus Project city?
It is possible, yes it is. And some people will require a different type of environment as long as the animals they have do not defecate on somebody else's land. As long as those controls are set in, you can have as many pets as you want to. But the more pets you have, the less access you will have to other things. So When the options of the future are offered, I don't think people will have too many pets.
In the designs you have right now, is it possible to expand the city when the housing limit is reached, or would people have to move to another city?
No, it would be possible to expand the city due to the expansion of technology along with it, and the hydroponic farming and farming in the oceans, where we will cultivate many new types of food, and crustaceans will be grown. In other words, the food supply can be increased if we use newer technologies.
The cities and all the designs I've seen that you have are great distances from one another, so there is room for expansion if desired or if functional.
This is true.
Okay, what do you think of quantum physics?
Well, quantum physics is useful so long as you don't add your own speculation, like if two objects can pulse at the same rate at a wide separation with no acting interval between the two objects, you have to say that we haven't found any radiant energy between the two objects. You can't say without any
Interacting
variables. You can't say those things. You can only say we haven't found any.
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation that I've seen in TV describing quantum physics as well. I remember Jacques stating that the Big Bang theory he had heard of is a metaphysical concept to him. Can you clarify what you mean?
If you're trying to find out how all this began, you can refer to earlier science, which states that matter cannot be created or destroyed. You can change the state of matter. You can change matter, solid matter, into radiant energy. But the amount of matter in the universe is always fairly constant. There's no such thing as perpetual motion. There's no such thing as a unit growing without absorbing something else to grow with. Plants cannot grow. They depend on sunlight, soil, and many other variables. Of themselves, they can do nothing. The same with humans and animals. They must consume something in order to exist.
So I've heard you mention too about when people describe the Big Bang and things started with the Big Bang. What was there the day before the Big Bang? Nothing?
Well, I don't deal with that because I have no way of touching that subject. It's merely speculative.
Mm-hmm.
Some aspects of speculation cannot be dealt with. They're theories or aspects of speculation, which we don't deal with in the Venus Project. We're very fundamental in terms of matter, energy, and human existence. Humans need certain things. They need warmth, love, contact. They need many other things which must be supplied if you are to have well-adjusted people. People deprived of human need, warmth, love, sex, whatever it may be, will become aberrated. Therefore, we must learn to supply whatever the needs are and make sure that the needs can be supported, sustained, and delivered.
Is it correct that the best of science and technology for societal concern is necessary for a resource-based economy to function, or can it function without?
Well, I'm not sure of the question, but there's no such thing as the best. There's always the best we know of up to now. And next year we'll know more about it. So the word the best will never be used in the future any more than the perfect automobile or the utopian city. No such thing. Things always undergo change, including the Venus Project and the resource-based economy will continue to undergo modification and change. There's no such thing as final frontiers.
And this person also asked this question. I don't think he knows too much about the Venus Project. He says, and so what is the difference between a resource-based economy and the Venus Project? I'm under the impression that the Venus Project is a group which advocates a resource-based economy. There are many such groups.
Well, the Venus Project has specific applications and specific methods of building cities and ways of growing food. All of those things have to be utilized in accordance with the Venus Project's proposals. If you have any criticism or new ideas, you submit it to the Venus Project. We will change the ideas if they work. We'll always test things out, check things out, so that we can keep up with the latest input.
The Venus Project, the resource-based economy that's advocated, is a total redesign, as we talked about in the first question, of a global culture. That means values, schools, production, distribution, really everything. It's new aims and values and proposals, and all of the spin-offs, all of the other groups that advocate a resource-based economy came after the Venus Project, because the Venus Project, Jacques coined the word a resource-based economy. And what they advocate and how they came from him and his work, but they interpret it and use it with their own projections of what they think it is. So if you really want to know what a resource-based economy is, then study the Venus Project. The Venus Project's the name of the group that advocates it because we come from Venus, Florida. That's how we got the name. How can we demand nations and governments more equality? How can we demand two nations and government? I don't know what it is.
You don't demand anything. You educate people in the methods of science applied to governing environment. The intelligent management of the resources of the earth is what's needed, and people have to be educated to do that.
Can we build a Venus Project city on the sea? It doesn't belong to any nation with the current resources, man, machine, materials, production methods, environment, that the Venus Project has. What resources do we have for this?
No nation would control or own a production method. Everything would be owned universally by all nations. There's no single nation that controls anything. Everything is based upon the joining together of all nations to maintain the environment, develop education, to bring out the best in all the world's people.
I think this person is asking, what are the resources that the Venus Project has right now, if I'm correct, I don't know, to build a first city in the sea, so it doesn't belong to any nation. The Venus Project has no resources. We have no money to initiate any of this on our own. We're making proposals through models, through videos, through blueprints to demonstrate what's possible, but we do not have the resources to build anything like that. Has the Venus Project developed any clean, renewable sources of energy in Florida?
There's no need to. There are plenty of natural resources. But during the research programs and energy consumption, the Venus Project will support all kinds of research that can develop newer and more efficient photoelectric cells, more efficient geothermal energy applications. All of that will be researched and developed and sponsored by the Venus Project.
We do not have that here in Venus, Florida. We had very limited funds developing this project. We built everything here ourselves, myself and Jacques, with our own funding. We had no outside funding from a majority of it. So we could either build a sustainable environment, an example that way, or we could develop models and videos and books to introduce this direction and the new value system to the rest of the world. And that's what we felt was more important. Jacques has hundreds of designs of renewable energy and methods of putting them in houses that we just couldn't do because we didn't have the funding. So we are on the grid here. But we do have a showplace here where we have hundreds of models. We have materials to make videos. We do that. We publish our own books. And that's what we felt was most important with our funding.
At this time, we felt that is most important.
Yeah, just because of the limited funds. Does the Venus Project have a day or anniversary?
No, it does not.
Okay, I understand that the first test city would have to be fundraised by products from the city inside a monetary system. How do you propose a product in which it's non-competitive within a monetary-based system?
We're not out to compete with anybody. We're out to solve problems. To use a minimum material, maximum strength, resistance to earthquakes and hurricanes. This is what our concerns are. Not competitive, not to beat someone else. But if someone comes up with a better idea for the design of a structure that will not be destroyed by hurricanes or tornadoes, if we have the material to do that, we will do it.
During the transition, Jacques has literally hundreds of products. If we had the first city going, we would want to have a research and development center. If we were affiliated with a country who backed us, or several countries that backed the first city, we would share those findings and those products with the countries, and they would benefit from them. And if we were in the transition, we may sell some of those products to other countries to support the research center. We may also have what we always call the theme park of the future, where we would show the global resource-based economy, where people would come to this theme park and they'd walk away smarter and they'd see the possibilities of the future within a resource-based economy. This could be a vehicle to help support the project as well, but we'd be working in between systems if we did it within the monetary system, and this is a possibility.
So may I just add detail to the questions? Because if in nations that does not agree with the Venus project, if you create product that helps nation who does want to be part of the project, how could you create a non-competitive product? Because in terms of price-wise, because if you make a product where to fund the Venus project as well as theme park, if the price is low, it will be competitive in terms of the monetary system. But then if it's expensive, then no one could afford such products.
Yes, we would try and make the products low enough. All those things are kind of minor things that could be worked out later. In order to get the products out there, we would try and keep the prices low as possible. And we would try and make products that are not competitive as well. Anything you wanted to add to that?
They're competitive in price only. Yes, the more stuff you make available to people, the sooner you defeat the old monetary system.
Thanks.
Will patents, trademarks, intellectual property rights, copyrights, and other such tools be used in a resource-based economy, or will it become obsolete? And will there be complete free flow of information?
It become obsolete in a resource-based economy, but during the transition, we may have to use that.
So in the resource-based economy, there won't be any patents, trademarks, or any such tools?
Not in a resource-based economy. There'll be no private patents or copyright, but everything would belong to everyone on Earth. But all people would be cared for medically, educationally, housing, clothing, all that would be provided.
Thank you.
My question is a question about behaviorism or learning theory. It's a detailed question, but I think it's important for whether or not you believe in a mechanistic or a free will point of view. It's that during an operant response, you have operants. The behaviorists say that classes of behavior are determined, like pressing a lever for a rat. That's determined. However, the individual response, the way the rat presses the lever, varies from each individual response. Each instance of the behavior is slightly different. Do you think that the individual response can be determined at some point? If it can't, then it's the indeterminacy, is what people argue.
I don't need to give you my opinion, but I can tell you what I've observed, that all people use the language of their culture. They do not speak in their own words. They speak with the language of the culture, the facial expressions, the institutions, the books they read, the movies they watch, the role models they watch, are all the mechanisms that give them their range of behavior. If the range of behavior is very different than that of normal, it means that the brain is abnormal. All the patterns that people have are reflective of the culture they live in. If you live in the South, you speak with a Southern accent. You have Southern values. In other words, if you live in a middle-class family, you have middle-class values. You seem to reflect the culture. The word individuality is strictly BS. An individual is a person that traveled many different places and has more than a simple point of view. Seminole Indian reflects the culture that they live in, that they're brought up in. If you were brought up in Germany, you reflect the Nazi culture if you've never seen anything else. You cannot escape your environment, nor its influences on your behavior and values. You can live in one culture and then go to another culture and outgrow certain values, but it's the other culture that helps you do that, or the books you read, or the people that you meet that influence your life. The difference between a Catholic and a Presbyterian is the environment they're reared in.
Does that help to answer your question?
I think it does. I think what you're saying is that behavior is predictable enough based off the person's educational background, their learning history. So classes will determine a lot, and individual responses varying a little bit seem to not, an Indian's an Indian, I think is what you're saying.
Those variations, whatever variations might exist amongst human beings, they all switch button to turn on the lights. Whether they press it hard or gently depends on the design of the switch.
Or on the mental state of the person pressing it. Some people are very timid. They might not be so forceful with the switch. But then they're not timid for no reason at all. They're timid because their environment has shaped them to be that way. So there's always a cause for behaviour. And basically, if we learn to shape our environment, then you'll shape the behaviour with it.
And the word that you said, depending on your education, well, education and environment means a lot more than just schooling. It means all the little interacting variables that comprise your lifetime. Your teachers, your schools, your books you read, the videos, your role models, your subculture, just everything. If you're a first child, a second child, how the parents treated you in relation to the other child. Sometimes they say that, well, two children come from the same environment and they end up this very, very different. It's because parents treat them very differently.
It's not easy to grasp this system because we're subjects and we're immersed in an environment. No Chinese baby was ever born speaking Chinese. You can't inherit acquired characteristics. In other words, prejudice, racism, dialect, facial expressions, attitudes about marriage and children are all part of your environmental indoctrination. I don't say it's the same for people. Their environments vary, so they come out somewhat different. But the differences are not due to individuality. They're due to the environmental impressions that you pick up.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you very, very much.
I'm glad that you asked these questions.
What do you refer to as being human? What does it mean to be human?
Well, we have a private definition of that. When people are concerned about the environment and their fellow human beings, that's what I mean. If you have no concern for the environment, if you dump toxic materials into the rivers and lakes, you hurt yourself. It has nothing to do with the values. If you're brought up to be self-sustaining, self-concerned, what's in it for me? And if you seek wealth, property, and power, you're offensive to all other people. Being human means you concern yourself with the needs of other people and the protection of the environment. If you fail to do that, I would say you will destroy human life.
And that expands past your own family or your own nation, but expands out to the entire globe and the entire human population. Well, again, we really appreciate this. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for coming, Jez and Roxanne. Thanks for everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A. We'll be doing the next one next Sunday. We'll see you in a week.